Hello there, and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. This week, in the words of legendary Tina Turner, what's love really got to do with it? Love in leadership. Is there a place for it? And if so, what does it look like? Come and join us for being a lovely leader.
Happy Valentine's Day, Bobby.
For tomorrow, that commercial codswallop? Yes, happy Valentine's Day indeed. Do you get to celebrate?
Oh God, you're a Valentine's Grinch.
I'm not. I've been turned into a Valentine's Grinch by my darling husband. So I'll have to tell you this little story before we actually get into it. So the very first year I was with him, I went on and on and on about Valentine's Day. So nothing was going to be much of a surprise. So I get home from work and on the table there is a bunch of dandelions that he has made the effort to pick out of a ditch.
Sweet.
A Terry's chocolate orange and an invite to the little chef down the road for dinner. I nearly went mad. So, of course, I got dressed very sulkily thinking I was being taken to Little Chef, should I say. Got into the car where there was an enormous box of chocolates, a huge bouquet of flowers, and a very posh dinner in this restaurant. So we were then booted out of the restaurant by 9 o'clock for the second sitting. We'd had to contend with a harp player sat behind us all the way through for dinner.
Oh
And I
my
got
Lord.
into the car and said, mate, if we stay together, you never have to do that again. So ever since, we have not celebrated Valentine's Day. So I'm sorry to all of those lovers out there, but happy Valentine's Day to you. But we will be doing other stuff. So there.
Yeah. I guess, my husband is not very romantic at all, and it frustrates the hell out of me, but then I have to remind myself that his love language is very different. He does things and he remembers things, or he does like little things throughout the year. So I can forego a big bunch of red roses and dinners that are just going to make me fatter.
I agree. And Ash will be grinning all over his face as being the lovely person he is listening to the podcast, that I have forgone Valentine's Day, but he does all sorts of other things to show how much
Every
I
day's Valentine's Day, Bobby. There
Every
you go.
Oh God, he'll be grimacing somewhere listening to this now, probably
Ash,
vomiting in
you
a bucket.
romantic little thing, you.
Oh my God. So, but anyway, we did say that whilst it was an excuse to be talking about love, Valentine's Day or the mulchy rainbows and butterflies romantic sort of love wasn't really going to be the steer that we took on this, but much more,
No.
is there a place for love as a leader or at work in organizations? So I think that that's going to be the premise of our conversation today, unless, as usual, we have a surprise for each other with having come at it from an entirely different angle. So I'm going to let you start to see where we start and end up.
Yes, I think where we start may not be where we end up. I think that this is a little bit of a sort of favorite of mine. And I think I've talked about it before in terms of when I left the United Nations and I was sort of looking at leadership, starting to look at how it worked, particularly in the humanitarian sector, and where I'd felt that weirdly, there wasn't an awful lot of love there. And I'd been to this workshop at Oxford University with the Oxford Character Project where they talked about leadership and love. And it struck me that all of the conversations that I'd had or read or seen about leadership didn't really talk about love in that way. I think it was implied in a lot of the things that we talk about. And we'll talk about the sort of behaviors that for me and for now, for other people that I've seen, that actually is a reflection of love in leadership. People didn't sort of say leadership is love or there is love in leadership. And I've referred to this book before by Kathy Granville Chapman and Emmy Bidston, which is Leader, Know, Love and Inspire Your People. And I'll put that in the link again. It's really an interesting concept. And I remember afterwards I was I go through these phases where I'm like a bit like a cult. I'm sort of, it's as if I discovered it myself and I'm posting about it everywhere. And a number of people in the comments said, I'd never really love and leadership wasn't really something that I'd come across. even people who really are from that servant leadership background of the military. And so I thought that was interesting that we don't really, not often, or many people don't talk about love in leadership, even though, as I said, lots of the behaviors that we talk about as good leadership actually are really a manifestation of love.
Yeah. And, your mention of the military, I just want to hop in here. We will hop around because that's what we normally do. But I'm always feeling quite proud of myself today that I will be the first person bringing up the Harvard Business Review because it's usually my incredibly intellectual partner here who is the first person who's read something from there. But I came across this article from them called "Can You Really Power an Organization with Love?" by somebody
Oh,
called
nice.
Duncan Coombe. And again, I'll put that in the links. But there's a number of things that they say. But what struck me, as you said then, about people in the military going, oh, it's not something that we've come across, or even with servant leadership using the word love, is that love is more, and this is from their research, love is more often spoken about, if you're not using the word, in companies that are founder led, family businesses, and, believe it or not, the military. And that's what their research has shown. And I was like, wow. And what they're saying is because of the high levels of personalization. We work in an organization which is the opposite of that sort of like corporate automation, consistency, processy, all of those sort of like elements. And it's much more about the person. And I wondered what you thought about that.
Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you say it, of course. And I guess, although I don't recall ever hearing the word love when aligned with
Me neither. No, me
with
neither.
the military, with leadership when we were in the military. Although now you've said it, I've got just having a little flicker in my brain about something that I read while I was sort of particularly looking at this issue of love a couple of years ago, and I do think that there is a document, which I've never been able to find because it's old military doctrine, and I might be making this completely up now, but I'm sure that it was either the British or the US military did used to have something in their military doctrine, which is a document was drafted, and I don't know that it ever became,
Saw
and we're
reflected
talking 30 or
it.
40 years ago, and it did have references to love in it, which seem to have been taken out of the modern military doctrine. Again, as I said, I think that there's an element of it's implied because, all those behaviors that we talk about, you know, listening, investing, and really knowing your people, caring and showing you care about the people, vocalizing your love, i.e., appreciating them,
Yeah.
respecting them, encouraging them, thrive, so that they thrive and succeed and support them. All of those things that are inherent in, particularly in servant leadership and other types of leadership, not all elements of leadership, but are all manifestations of love. They're all
Yep.
things we do for people that we love. And so I do think that there's an element of it's not necessarily overtly being referred, the word isn't used. And I do think you're right that you see it more in smaller, more intimate companies or organizations. And I think one of the things that I've been reading about is this word intimacy, which you also don't seem to see referred to in terms of leadership because everyone thinks of naughtiness and nakedness when we talk about intimacy. But, intimacy is the same thing, noticing, showing interest, remembering small things about you, the people, small acts of kindness. I'm gonna come back to that in a little bit, but I do think that, there is an element of intimacy that makes sort of love leadership, servant leadership more easy,
Yeah. And I,
easier. That's the
no,
word. Making words up now.
yeah, I agree. And so, I haven't tended to be in founder led or family businesses. I have been in the military, and a bit like you, I don't remember the word love or intimacy being used. And we're not even going to get into intimacy in the military. I don't think that's for another whole different type of podcast. Um, but I think that love isn't necessarily so much about the word or a feeling as the act, as the action. And intimacy, I think, goes back to that higher level of personalization, closer in, so that you really know your people, you know how they tick. And all of those other things that you've said about appreciation, listening to them, training and supporting them, nurturing them, all of those being acts of love. So, and this article that I read says that it doesn't necessarily actually need to be the word. It's about action speaking louder than those words. And I think that that's where I'm at with it. And the other thing that they say is that it's not necessarily rainbows, unicorns. And for all those people out there, whilst I was working in HR, who referred to me as fluffy.
Me
So, for
fluffy.
anybody out there, when I was working in HR who referred to me as fluffy, there is absolutely fuck all about me that is fluffy. It is not fluffy to want to care about people, to support them, to train, to develop them, to make them the best they can be. And so often, I think that where I have seen love at play or the word being used is tough love where, and I don't even know that that's the right way to define it, but in actual fact, to do all of those things that you want to do, sometimes you have to have those honest conversations. And we talked about this the other week, but the honest conversations with me is an action of love to make people better, to get the best out of them. So I think that with what you've been saying about the words, it isn't about the words, it is about the actions.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, love is an action. It's a verb. Yeah, I think that's one of those issues that people struggle with. They think that it just sort of happens. Love, particularly in romantic relationships, that "Oh, I'm just going to be, I'm in love and now everything's perfect." But actually, love is something you have to do, and you have to keep doing. You have to keep doing things that are love. And I may be misquoting Saint Brené Brown, but
Saint
I-
Brennan.
I'm I'm sure I'm sure that in one of her books, and again, I'm not entirely sure which one, she talks about love, that hate is not the opposite of love. Actually,
It's fear.
fear is the opposite of
Absolutely.
love.
I came across
Yeah.
that too. The ego is what drives fear, but love comes from, a life. And I think this is how she says it as well, as a life well lived. It's coming from within. It's not being the persona. I mean, last week we were talking about speaking from the heart and actually being, and we've talked about authentic self, and that's where love actually comes from. But I also think the other thing I was going to say about love is that, especially from within an organization setting, there's a couple of things I wanted to say actually. The first one is that those out there who are critics of the word or think that, being in that mode makes you a bit soft and all the rest of it, I'm not decrying the fact that it's got to come with balance. It's got to come with some level of head work to it as well, the logic, the strategy, the numbers. But what I'm suggesting is that you don't necessarily do one without the other, so that you can lead from the heart and from care, but you regulate it with logic and reason. So from a work perspective, you need both. I'm just going to pause that for a moment, because before I forget the other thought I was having, that level of personalization, I think that somehow, or sometimes when I've found myself really tired with an organization, is that I feel, or I have felt, like it's just me who cares. And there's swathes of
Mm,
others around me who don't know how to do that because they are head led rather than heart led. And
mm,
we've talked about the ripple effect and starting with your own team. But what I do find is that those organizations where you can really feel it, really sense it in their culture, is where somehow they have made it almost like, this HBR article uses it like this, but I get it. Use it like their operating system, so that wherever you are, be it at
mm,
a board level, a senior level, working in customer service, working behind the scenes, it doesn't matter, what even what your policies and your processes say. There is a level of that heart led as well as head led in it. So, the example I can give, another of my little soapbox moments, but policies in organisations where, they're written with the fact that every poor bastard that comes to work there is a malingerer who's out to get them, who doesn't want to do a decent day, it doesn't want to do a
Mm,
decent day's work. And so their policies and processes are written up like that accordingly, rather
yeah.
than everybody comes there to do the best job that they can do. With support and nurture, they can actually get better in that. And yeah, there'll be the odd one or two who's got some trickiness, but again, you can treat them in a decent, respectful way to either move them along and move them out, because that's the reality of it, or get them to be better. But if your policies are saying one thing whilst you're allegedly a heart-led organisation, that's when you find your operating system at odds with each other.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I have experienced that where effectively the policies are that assuming that everyone is just on the take and is untrustworthy. And actually, part of love is trust. When you love someone, you trust them. You put an environment of trust around them. And yeah, as you said, if someone then takes the piss or whatever, then you deal with that, but you don't tar everyone as if you assume that they're already every single person is out there, so that the policies are there that actually, and in my experience, those policies, those types of policies make people's lives really difficult. So they add an extra layer of bullshittery,
I
for
love
better,
that.
for want of a better word.
Bullshittery.
Bullshittery. I think the word is bureaucracy, isn't it? Make your life, if you're traveling for work, or if you're having to spend time away, or, making claims for things that you're entitled to, like your leave, they make it really difficult. So you then have to, and it not only does it put stress on the people who work there, but it also takes time, because why the hell would I use my free time to do the administration that relates to things that I have to do for work that I have no choice about? So then you are then spending time during work dealing with bullshittery rather than actually getting on with work. So it just doesn't make any sense for organizations as far as I can see. And I do think this issue of trust is really, really important, because, as you say, it sets the environment for the way people work. And also, as you said, it's basically saying, we're saying we do this, but actually we don't. Our values are not aligned with what we are purporting to have as our values. So yeah, I'm a really big one on that. And I think that the other important thing to notice or understand is there's tons of research that shows that organizations that are truly modeling that sort of love leadership, whether they call it love leadership or not, but the elements or the behaviors, the actions, are ones that are going to be more successful. Because I'm going to go into a little bit of science. Hello, science. Oxytocin is a hormone in our body that is associated with love. And it's also associated with physical love, because it's associated with, it's released when women give birth, it's released when men come. I think it's also released when women come. And it's a feel-good hormone. It's one of the reasons why mothers still love their children when they're screaming and squalling, is because it actually, when they breastfeed as well, they release oxytocin. It releases a good feeling. It's associated with dopamine as well. And so when we are in a environment where we feel loved or see behaviors that our brain associates with love, then it raises the oxytocin in our bodies, and it is good for us. It reduces depression, it reduces mental health issues, it increases self-worth, it increases self-confidence, it increases self-esteem. So it's kind of this amazing reaction to behaviors that are often really, really simple, as we've said, like listening, like showing that you support or showing that you care, small acts of kindness, like saying thank you and appreciating, all of things that actually, whether you call them soft skills or not, because I don't like those words, soft skills or fluffy, they're not fucking fluffy. They are human being skills, but they are also really good for
I
business.
agree. I
That's
know, I
my
agree.
rant
There's
over it.
an in a similar vein, although nowhere near as sciencey or sexual as the way that you've just described it, because I am so pious, as we are aware. That's a joke, by the way. There's a book by Adam Grant, who I love. There's the word again. Who I think I was talking about before. His book Think. This is one called Give and Take: A Revolutionary Approach to Success. And he tells stories in this book about connection. And the things that you've just been talking about, are all things that create connection. So he gives examples of where you show a human being the benefit to other human beings of them being a human being. So there's examples like a call center that's cold calling around giving money to scholarships for people to attend university, and they get to meet those who have benefited from a scholarship. So they then have more skin in the game to help more people like that. There's another example of radiologists. And, whilst you have to hope that their diagnostic accuracy is brilliant, there was research done to show that their accuracy went up by 46% when they added a picture of the person to the scan they were looking at of their brain. And so I'm
Mm.
with you on all of those things, which is creating connection, because I also think it supports performance in a business and the resilience. And when you get into that, for want of a better word, intimate relationship with somebody in the workspace without it necessarily becoming sex or anything like that, that you want to do better for others. So I'm concurring with your rant wholeheartedly.
Simon Sinek, also Saint Simon Sinek, he has a book out of his many, which is Leaders Eat Last:
Yep.
Why Some Teams Pull Together and
Yep.
Others Don't. And he does a lot of referencing to the military, the environment in which the military operates in terms of looking out for each other. And despite the fact that in military there are, very steep
Mm.
hierarchies, that doesn't matter. This idea that the leaders are servant leaders, and he talks a lot about servant leadership in terms of this caring, respecting, and showing very clearly that you are there, the serve to lead motto of Sandhurst. And while lots of people scoff about it, say, well, that isn't shown, but that is the ideal, that the leader is there at the back when people are having things they need, and at the front when they're all off to go into some
Yeah.
dangerous situation. And so I think that there's a lot of recognition that love, whether we say the word or not, but I wish we would. I think maybe that one of the issues, that I wanted to talk about in this episode, is that it seems to be the word that everyone's scared of saying. And I know that there are lots of people who feel very uncomfortable when we say leadership is love, and they're like, no, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. Oh, no, that makes me feel uncomfortable. But why? Why do we fear saying that we love people? We love the people that we work with. We care about them, or we should do. We care that they succeed. We are happy when they succeed. We are thrilled when they get a brilliant job somewhere else, and not because we don't want them to stay, but because we've watched them grow and we've nurtured them into a little butterfly that can fly away, or not, or we watch them in our own companies grow. I think that it just makes me a little sad, I guess. And yeah, I am a massive hippie, so, there you go. But I do think it's sad that we can't just say love. We're
Well,
afraid of it.
I think it goes back to the very limited definition of it. Go back to looking at definitions, or these aren't exactly my quotes, but, one of the definitions was a strong affection for another arising out of kinship or personal ties. So when I read that, I go, well, why is that such a bad thing to actually then be using the word love in an organization? Because organization is about kinship of a sense, shared values, shared goals, everything else besides, but also the personal ties. We spend a lot of time at work, not just at home.
Yeah.
So it works for me in there. And then Duncan Coombe in his article talks about both Tolstoy and Freud. The former saying, one can live magnificently in this world if one knows how to work and how to love. And the other saying, love and work and love, that's all there is. So, when we look back in history, it's not all been about Saint Valentine. You know, Saint Brenny
Yes.
and Saint Simon have got a view to say that the work or the word will work in an organizational setting. But I think that many of us, one, are tied up with that romantic version of the definition, and two, I can imagine a lot of people out there. We've said it before, but a middle-aged white man going to an 18, 21-year-old, they're not going to say I love you in the workplace. But even the thought of using the word love and these mixes
Yeah.
of definitions, how flipping
Yeah.
dangerous that could end up as
Yeah.
a situation. And so I'm sitting here thinking about an organization trying to be love led, because if you all were, and this is me being woo woo and hippie now, but if you all were, you'd let up on each other a little bit for saying it a
Mm.
bit wrong, even though the intention was in the right place. But we're just not there in a lot
Yeah.
of society and a lot of environments. So yeah, I'm stuck. I'd love to use it more. I know I have
It
used it, but you
I
can see how it could go very easily wrong.
tipped
Yeah.
up, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, I take your point. I just think it would be nice if we could start to normalize it. I was just thinking actually about when I've worked in Arabic speaking countries and the word for love is hub. I'm probably pronouncing it really badly and all of my Arabic speaking friends will be shuddering now, but it's hub. And so hobby, it means my darling in Tunisian, but most people will talk to their colleagues and call them habibi or habibti, meaning beloved, I guess, is a translation, but it doesn't mean it's not a romantic, it's more about, brother, sister, colleague, someone that I care about, habibi, habibti for men and women. So they kind of do use a word that relates to love about just people that they
Mm.
work with, and so I kind of like that, and maybe they don't think of it in that way, and maybe I'm completely misinterpreting or misunderstanding, but I'd always been struck how people would come up to me and say, "Oh, habibti, this," and I was like, "Oh, okay, it means that I'm kind of part of their
Mm.
caring group." But I also wanted to talk about self-love, not a euphemism, so no one get excited, but that we kind of and we have talked about this in terms of modeling behaviors, but it's really hard, so even if you're in a organization that doesn't have love as a value, it doesn't stop you with you even if, I know I can imagine you can imagine if you're a CEO and you've got thousands of people, it's really difficult to be able to care about each individual rather than just care for your sort of the people who work for you as a group. But that doesn't stop her caring about the people who they immediately work with or work under them. So you can sort of say, okay, I'm going to show act as if as I love or I'm going to love these colleagues. And then they with their direct reports. So it kind of, as you say, the ripple effect, you can start to have to model that sort of behavior. But it's really, really difficult to model the behavior if you don't show yourself love and manifest love towards you, i.e., by taking care of yourself, by by if you're saying to people it's okay for you to take time off to get to spend time with your children, or if your children are sick, but if you don't do that for your own family, so if you're not modeling the behaviors that you are saying, even if you're not doing for the people that work for you. So I do think self-love is a really, really important starting place. It's very difficult to love other people if you don't love yourself, for example. And as a leader, you cast a long shadow. You really, really do have an influence on people and their behaviors. So you have to model that by loving yourself first in the nicest
I completely agree. And I'd also say that in order to do that, we've used these words before, but you have to learn to tune in what that looks like and what you're capable of. Because I think that the other thing to add to that is that the other piece, and it goes back to what I've just said about the situations that you might find yourself in an organization, but it is equally normal in an organization to find um, real doubt about love and nurture, and indeed ambivalence to it because of how life has shown up for you. You know, you start saying to people, we want to use the word love in an organization, and it might bring back all sorts of memories or reflections or history for them, which also potentially is the thing that is not helping encourage them into self love. So, what I would say to everybody who needs to be role modeling in that way, that, well, there's two things I'd say. You want leaders to be able to do it, but you do want leaders to be authentic or to do it to the capacity that they feel comfortable with doing. So, love for one leader might be enough for them to learn to make better eye contact and smile. They might not even open their mouth, but that would be more than the averting eyes or not smiling that, we've experienced with leaders. But also, if there are others around you who are better at doing it, take your lead from them. I've worked for bosses who would say to me, I'm not a people person, that's why I've got you here. I've said you can't be off the hook, but I'll help you learn to articulate things to show that you care if you don't want to be saying them because you're an introvert and you don't want to be doing it yourself. So I think I am agreeing with you that it stems from self, but for each of us, what our capacity is different. I think, I mean,
I
I don't know
understand
about
that.
you, but if when I was sitting here thinking about love and, where I was at with definitions of it in my 20s, 30s, or whatever it might be, it's gone,
A
yeah,
long time
very long
ago,
time ago, but it's
Bobby.
gone from that whole self-absorbed over dramatization. I'll never be able to eat again because I'm so passionately in love with this shit that's treated me really badly, to growing love, love, kinship, friendship that I've found with Ash and family and friends, and to love in the workplace and what that means in terms of care, support. Your definition can grow, but in amidst all of that
Yeah.
was this armor plating of heart, being scared of using the word, being scared of being rejected, and everything else besides, that there has to be some level of overcoming before you get anywhere near learning to love self. So
Yeah,
I'm using
I
I'm
can
using that
I
as an
can understand that.
example, and having been a leader of other people, I think, I was not good at showing that and being much more of the tough love, quality, deadline, head led leader, and latterly much more heart led, but knowing that there'd still got to be logic and reason within that too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I found a really beautiful sort of idea from a guy called Bob Goff, and I think was originally a lawyer in the US who has set up an NGO called Love Does. So again, going back to this love
Nice.
as an action. And he's quoted as saying, "Give away love like you're made of it," which I think is really beautiful and actually is a really nice way to sort of shift your mindset a little bit, because there's no suggestion that that is, romantic sexual love. That's recognizing love for what it is, which is that beautiful idea of kinship and caring
Can
and
you say it again?
support. So give away love like you're
Give away
made of
love
it.
like you're made of it. I love that. I think that that will be the end quote. You can just use it again because it's better than the one that I had.
No, we'll go with your one too. You can never have too
Oh,
many
yeah,
quotes.
maybe.
Well, I was gonna, because
Near
we're
the
kind
end.
of coming up to the end of this episode, and I actually fancied setting a little challenge to people, to the listeners, in terms of love as an action. And it's just that if you are a leader, is over the next month, think about spending a little bit of time with each of the people that you work with or that you lead and find out something you didn't know about them and remember it so that in the future you may be able to link it into something and just pay attention a little bit more to the people that you work with or thank them for something. If you see that they do something, actually just acknowledge it. So starting to do little acts, little random acts of kindness over the next month. I think that's going to be my challenge
I
with
love
you.
that. Can I just riff off it a little bit? Because this
Of
whole
course.
element for me about integration, there may well be leaders out there who find that really easy to do at work and not at home, and others that find it really easy to do at home and not at work. So my invitation would be to do it in both places.
Yay, that's a good one. Nice riff. Okay, so final quote, Bobby, with at the end of this love fest in the purest understanding of the word.
Yes. So the quote is it's an unknown quote, this one. But here we go. You can love people without leading them, but you cannot lead people without loving them.
Love it. That's brilliant. And it's very true. Right then, till next time.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Links to any references we have made are provided on our website and in the Spotify podcast page. Next week, we are joined by another guest, my dearest friend Nina Sims from Third Space Coaching. And we'll be chatting about learning to love yourself. Our journeys, the challenges, what becomes possible when you realise love also includes you. So join us for Being with Nina Sims. See you then.